I would much rather respect you than agree with you.
100%. I believe that. And so for me, if someone disagrees with something I say, I want to hear it because I might like their story better and take that on. Because for me, it's like I've learned a long time ago through challenges to psychedelics that I don't want to go into anything being the knower. I want to be the learner. Because the learner, if they get things wrong, they just go, great, now I get to be the learner. If they get things right, they're like, great, I get to learn how I got it right, you know? So they're always winning, you know? And for me, it was like, I don't want to always base my happiness or joy off of like subjective things of whether I got it right or wrong. It's like, I want to be happy no matter what.
Spear and Clover Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jason Skisick, the entrepreneurial evangelist. I'm here with Ryan Sprague of Connect with Cannabis. Ryan, how are you, brother?
Dude, I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here with you at the beautiful lake, maxing and relaxing, hanging out, having some great conversations.
Yeah,
it's
right
great.
On. Yeah, so we're here at the Enlifted Lake House. This is an amazing experience. Super cool people. And obviously the central figure is Mark England, who was my first repeat guest. But definitely like the oil that's lubricating this engine has a lot to do with you, my friend.
Thanks, bro.
I feel like you know, from like an enlifted, more like spiritual side, like you have you clearly share something with everybody that's here.
Yes.
But from like a business perspective, like you're Levi's.
Yeah.
It's like
Yes.
everybody's on this mission to go find gold in the world of their coaching business or their, you know, spiritual journey or their entrepreneurial journey or their self-discovery mission. And then the cannabis guy is there to help lubricate that. And not just that, because the cannabis is only a part of it, but like you're such a clearly, I see your reflection in every face when you're in the room. So
hell yeah.
That's an interesting thing. And shout out to you for like just having that power.
Dude, you know, it took me a long time to step into that power, and I'd be lying if I said it was always easy or always like, it's still kind of like I'm figuring out my groove, you know, and how to be myself. And I think like everyone is in some way or shape or form, but being around communities like this, the great part about it, aside from all the other stuff we mentioned, is that people reflect things to you.
Yep.
You know, when you're around other people that are into self-development, essentially, like I call us all mechanics, right? Like when you're around, if you're a car guy and you're around a mechanic that is working on cars, you can have a totally different conversation with that person than just the average person at a car show that looks at your car, right? And so like when you're here, you're like with all car guys. And so when you get a compliment or something reflected to you from a car guy, that's when I take it more seriously as a car guy. Now, the car guy analogy being coach, facilitator, guide, healer, self-development, junkie, any of those, you know, terms.
Yeah, right so, on. So in your mind, what's the perfect car?
Ooh, man, the perfect car. So I'll go reasonable and then unreasonable. Because there's always two levels, right? Like there's the one of like, okay, this is what I believe I can have right now, and then there's like the real, you know, thing that I'd like.
Yeah.
So for me, we were talking about it earlier, CL63 AMG.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm 6'4", so I want a big car.
Yeah.
I like feeling safe on the road, so I like heavier cars.
Okay.
People were like, what if you can't go as fast? I'm like, listen, I'm not going 160 miles an hour very often, but I am around crazy people on the road very often. So I want to be safe over whatever extra speed that would give me. So I love the CL63 AMG Designo Edition. believe, then I want everyone to do whatever makes them happy. You know, I'm unattached to if someone likes what I say about cannabis. It's like, hey, I'm still going to believe what I believe.
Right.
And if you don't, that's awesome. Let's have a conversation about it. Even if we agree to disagree, I like to have those conversations. But I'm never going to tell someone you should believe this, or this is what to believe, or this is truth, because I don't know. You know?
But it's a powerful strategic advantage to not need to be right.
Exactly.
Because you can stand at a mountaintop and say things, and the echoes don't necessarily attack you back. Does that make sense? Like
100%.
I think there's genius to that. Like if you really listen to what some of the really successful people in this like personal health space, or even politicians are like kind of the evil version of that. It's like they can say things that are true to them, but that are applicable to a lot of different people from a lot of different perspectives. I think Tony Robbins is really good at that. I think Gary Vee is good at that, although he focuses it a little bit. And then certainly like the Bible or a politician. The thing that they're really doing is they're being that universal adapter, and hopefully, you know, aside from the politician point of view, hopefully that thing brings you to like the source of what they're trying to preach. And I think that's powerful, and I think you do it very intuitively and naturally.
Thank you.
Very interesting. I had somewhere I was going to go with that.
Well, it is interesting, you know, like, I mean, I've noticed this in my favorite people. There are people that know what they believe, yet they're like there to talk about it, but they're not there to like push their views. Because, you know, if you look at David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, this book broke it down really well for me, where power is this term that's been thrown around, when in actuality, what most people mean by power is force. Like when you look at politics, right? Like, even with like the vaccine or any of these things, when anyone's telling you you need to do this, that's force. If they're like become educated and make your own decision, that's power, right? So they can still have like their belief system of like, hey, you should get this or you shouldn't. But if they're telling, on both sides, right? If they're telling you you should not do this or you should do this, versus looking to make your own research, but just make sure it's your decision you make, like that's how I look at everything. It's like, I don't care what someone believes. I don't care if they believe in God. I don't care if they're an atheist, as long as it's what they believe. And it's not something they're just regurgitating from someone else's experience of life.
Yeah, I would rather talk to somebody that I disagree with that's thought about it a lot than somebody that I agree with who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. It's a much better experience. I would much rather respect you than agree with you.
100%.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And
respect you.
Yeah, and I respect you, bro, you know? Well, it's funny because, like, what I've found out through a series of not doing this was that, like, for instance, rap music, right? For years I was like, I'm a metalhead, I don't listen to rap music. And then after years I was in the club one day, right, and at an EDM show. First of all, I listened to certain electronic music, and then I got into rap music. And I realized after that, I was like, holy shit, I missed out on like 10 years of stuff I could have enjoyed. Now, did it happen the exact way it should have? Yes, I believe that, right? But it showed me through these direct experiences I've had, like, dude, if you close yourself off, man, like, you're just missing out on maybe an even better experience. And so for me, if someone disagrees with something I say, I want to hear it because I might like their story better and take that on. Because for me, it's like, I've learned a long time ago through challenges to psychedelics that I don't want to go into anything being the knower. I want to be the learner. Because the learner, if they get things wrong, they just go, great, now I get to be the learner. If they get things right, they're like, great, I get to learn how I got it right, you know? So they're always winning, you know? And for me, it was like, I don't want to always base my happiness or joy off of like subjective things of whether I got it right or wrong. It's like, I want to be happy no matter what. And so like, this is like things I've gone through where through my own challenges, I just realized like, this is the way I want to live. And so that's how I choose. But when I work with clients or anyone, it's always like, you get to ultimately choose how you want to live, what your values are, what you stand for, and what you want to be remembered for in your legacy, you know? And that's why one of the exercises I have people do that usually puts things in perspective is I have them write their own eulogy, you know? And that is something that I found. I did it in a group I was in once, and I was like, holy shit, this really puts things in perspective. Because say you think you want to be a billionaire and you want to have 5 companies, right? You're very like, maybe you're in your 30s and you're just like going for it, right? Well, if you write your eulogy and all of a sudden you realize that all you really wanted was for people to, you know, say that they loved you and that you supported them and that you were there for them and you were there for your family, all of a sudden it's like, wow, is that what a billionaire is going to be able to do? Maybe I just want to be a millionaire. You know, maybe I'll be able to make a couple million and be able to do that, and now I'm in alignment. You know, so I think that eulogy really helped me out a lot. Just be able to look at like, what I want to be remembered for. What are the things that I would want someone else to talk about with regards to my high points in life, pardon the pun, and like things like that, you know, and that really helped put things in perspective for me, for sure.
Are there any things that you want or that you feel or that motivate you that you wish they didn't? Are there things that you can't let go of yet?
That's a good question. Let me think on that. I mean, I would be naive to say my ego isn't in part of what I'm doing. I mean, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think the ego is going to be in anything you do. But for me, I've been able to like kind of shape it out where it works for me. Not all the time. I still come up against stuff plenty of the time. Yeah. But I think like the mind trap is really like the thing that sometimes I realize like, oh, fuck, I'm in a fucking malware program again.
Yeah.
I got that virus again. That's coming up again. Because I think there's, you know, one thing Mark said that's ricocheted around my head since he said it was there is levels to this shit.
Yeah.
And by this shit, insert blank here. Like literally anything. And so when it comes to like disempowering patterns, things of like, you know, oh my God, what are people going to think of me if I say this? You know, because there's been levels to it, right? Like coming out talking about cannabis is one thing, then talking about growing, another whole thing, then talking about, you know, cannabis being a spiritual aid and ally, especially when I'm in the mystery school and they're not plant medicine proponents. And when I'm in there and like they're asking me what I do, and I sometimes like, you know, kind of mull it over, well, you know, I do integration work. You know, and I'm like, why the fuck didn't you just say you work with cannabis? What's going on? Why are you afraid of like these people not liking you? You know, things like that for sure still come up.
You've been on a lot of podcasts, increasingly larger podcasts. I mean, come on.
It's been fun.
And how do you feel about being observed personally?
I actually don't mind it nearly as much as I thought I would, because I did the work and continue to do the work. It's not a done process, but to not really give a shit what people say, because this is what happened. So when I started getting on bigger shows, I knew, because obviously I've been looking at comment sections for a long time on big shows.
Stop that.
And I was like, yikes, you know, like, so I imagined, I don't want to say I expected the worst, because then based on what I believe about manifestation, I would have manifested it, but I was aware of the things that could happen. I was like, listen, I'm going out there talking about cannabis, being a spiritual aid and ally, being a teacher, all these things. I'm like, I imagine there's going to be so many science-driven people that are like, where are the facts? Where's the science? Yada, yada. But the funny thing was that when I actually went on these bigger shows, yeah, there were some comments in there that were like, oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like one comment was pretty funny, actually. It was, I was talking about doing MDMA in a strip club and how that for me was a ceremony, right? And so a lot of people had something to say about that. Like, oh, this is a ceremony. And personally, what I believe a ceremony is where you take it and where you're intentional about it. And that was an intentional journey for me, and it was actually the biggest awakening point of my life, no matter how someone wants to believe it. Sometimes, for me, I expect the awakenings when I'm in a church, or when I'm at the mystery school, or when I'm doing one of those like really spiritual, esoteric things, but that puts pressure on it, right? Because then I'm expecting something to happen. You know where I never expected an awakening to happen? On MDMA in a strip club.
Yeah.
And so like, when I went on these bigger shows, or have gone on these bigger shows, I was okay enough with realizing, like, listen, this is a very new way to look at cannabis. Probably people are going to be a little opposed to it at first, especially because in the cannabis community, most people are interacting with the plant to numb out their emotions. So then I come on there saying, hey, you're numbing out your emotions, take breaks and use intention. They're like, fuck you, you know, because, and at the end of the day, I tell them, like, you don't have to do this. This is just a way to use it, you know, but it's been interesting, you know, being observed. And I think that one of the things that I've been able to do pretty well and continue to work on for sure is just knowing who I am, and luckily having a really strong community of people that I know love me for who I am. And so because I've been able to get reflected of like, wow, that's really cool what you do, and come more into who I am, especially with the mystery school stuff too, and just shed masks and layers. Now when I go on there and I hear flack back, I'm like, hey man, like that person's probably in a really challenging spot. Like I got a hate comment the other day, something pretty funny. It was on one of the videos, and some guy goes, same content every day, thanks for putting a shirt on, or something like that. So there's a lot of ways you can respond to that, right?
I mean, he's a fan.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's on my comments, right? So you could go fuck you, right? Which like you lose if you do that. And then you could do like the sly, shitty way of like the, you know, I don't even know an example
That's
of it.
That's just like your opinion.
Yeah, exactly. or like, oh, I think you're suspecting me for someone who actually cares about your opinion, question mark, you know? Like, let's have a conversation about this. I could go down that route. What I chose to do is just like, hey man, sending you love. If you need support, reach out. I can only imagine where you're at to be leaving comments like this on people's timelines, you know? Because honestly, like I remember points in my life where I wanted to leave shitty comments on people's things, and I remember the place I was at, you know? And to do that, that just means like for me and what I've seen in many different people I've worked with, you're fucking angry, the life's not shaping up the way you want it to, but you feel completely disempowered to make a change. So your control factor is going on and thinking you know more than other people and stating your opinion as if it's fact on their thing. Yeah. You know, and so for me it was like, well, I've done that before, so I can imagine where he's at. So it was just like, fuck it, dude. Like, what am I going to get from that? Like, if I really want to have fun doing what I'm doing, am I going to let every fucking naysayer get to me? Like, that's not any fun, and that's not going to allow me to do my mission. And it's not going to allow me to help the people that are really looking for help out there. Yeah. And so for me, every time one of those things happens and I get through it, I go, good. You know, and so I get excited when people leave those comments because it allows me to get my ego a little bit triggered and work through it every time. You know?
Yeah, and it's good, man. You can have the best car in the world. It's nice to know the suspension can eat up the bumps, but you need the bumps.
Exactly. Avoid them still, but yeah, it's good to know you can hit them.
Interesting, because I think I look at these types of conversations sort of from the other side, like from the bottom back or from the end back or whatever. Because what I hear, if anybody hears the story about your, this really awakening, important moment of yours on MDMA at a strip club, they may have all sorts of judgments. But like objectively, you were in a room where it was meaningful and powerful and like positive for you, and it was probably a shitty night for somebody in the same room. And it's just such an interesting thing to just realize, like objectively, like it is. I don't care about their story. I don't care about your story, respectfully. It's more like the fact that two people can be in the same space doing similar or the same things, depending on who you pick in that room, can go through something and have totally different experiences. It's just like a credit to the idea that it is not what's happening, it's how I process and respond and live in what's happening.
Exactly.
And that's like Buddhism, Christianity, I mean, that's everything
100%.
Kind of combined. And so one of the things when I talk to folks like you that I like to do is I like to think about my least receptive listener who would be coming at this from a totally different perspective. Somebody who's a police officer in Oklahoma, doesn't experiment with cannabis, doesn't think about spirituality. They're at church every week, which is fantastic. You don't have to do these things to understand that we're all having a different experience, potentially even, and I just love when it's that narrow, even in the same room and setting.
100%. I mean, I'm a big fan of saying that, especially when it comes to plant medicines, they are not for everyone, sure. and cannabis definitely falls into that too. I think a lot of people are out there saying, oh, everyone needs this, and personally, there's no objectiveness in reality, right? So why would I apply that just to a foundational element that I already know is not true about life, right? Yeah. That, just like you said, we can be in the same room, you could have the same medicine, you could have the same drinks, the same clothes, the same girlfriend if you could clone them, and you could have a totally different experience, You can have a different experience 1 minute to the next. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so for me, like going into that strip club, a lot of the backstory that I don't tell, I do tell it on podcasts, but I don't know if people take it in, was that I was I was getting to a point where it was a culmination point, where I was working at a dispensary. I thought I was going to be a head grower and be in the industry forever, and that dream started fading away before my very eyes as the corporation took us over, and everything that I had looked to escape my whole life, right, the khakis, the office supplies, like the ties, everything like that started getting into like the thing that I had used to escape from, right? And so now I'm like, wow, the industry I got into isn't even safe from these fucking jackoffs, right? So from there, because again, like for me, it's just like I have always had a really big challenge, like going to very normal places like a Staples or like a fucking Michael's or places like that, and just watching like the managers do their thing. And again, no judgment, it's just not my flavor of ice cream, right? Yeah. Again, it might be theirs and that's awesome. I'm happy they're living their life. But for me, like I worked at Staples when I was young, and that's like my worst nightmare. I worked at a porn store too, which is another whole story, but I worked at a Staples, and that was like the smell of office supplies haunts me in my dreams. And so here I'm at the dispensary. These guys move in who are from like literally Lowe's, finance, real estate, and they just putting that vibe in there. So my girlfriend and I and our buddy Devin, we were all aspiring entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry. So we decided we're going to go to MJ BizCon out in Vegas. We're going to find our own investors, and we're going to just dive into it. And this will work out great. We'll bring love-grown cannabis to the world. It's going to be a perfect day. So we go out there. We go to the convention, and it was just a bunch of people. Like, how many grams per square foot can you make me? What's the cheapest price you can cultivate cannabis for? Like, it was just a lot of that. And so after the second day, we felt pretty beat up. And we were kind of like, our dream had just vanished in front of us. And so I asked her, I go, what do you want to do? And she goes, can we take Molly and go to a strip club? Nice. And I was like, fuck yeah. Because as innocent as it sounds, I had never been to one. She had never been to one. So we decided we're going to go together. So we had a fucking blast, right? Like, we were in there with a totally different objective than I imagine most people go into there for. I don't know. But we weren't in there to, like, flirt with girls or anything. It was just, like, to go have a fun experience.
Yep.
And whatever happens, happens type thing. And so we went in there, and immediately, like, we started getting a lot of attention in there. Now, of course, that could easily be said, like, we walked in and they're going to do that. But like, the strippers started being there's something different about you guys. We can tell you're not here for the same thing that a lot of other people are here for.
Yeah.
So we'd hang out with them, we'd buy a lap dance or whatever and just talk. Yeah. And I remember we bought this lap dance with this girl, and it was supposed to be 10 minutes, whatever it is. She ended up hanging out with us for 45 minutes, and we just talked the entire time. We heard their life plans. They were this girl was opening up a beauty line or whatever with lipstick and all this stuff. It was super cool. Another one was getting into real estate, and she was she was a little bit older, 35, and she was a lot of these young girls, they don't have a plan yet. You got to have a plan with this. You can't just do this forever. And I was like, man, this is so fucking cool. Yeah. And when we left there, we lost track of time. We left too late. And Rachel was working on a big application for an Illinois dispensary, actually. Cool. And so it was super boring for her. She took it on to make money, right? That was when we were out of alignment still with just the left brain, we'll make money doing this. So she does that. And so she was planning on working on it on the plane ride home. Well, now we have 3 hours to get back to the hotel, sleep, and get on the plane. So we're both yikes. And so she goes through this experience where I can tell she's experiencing a real low. Right? Oh my God, what am I going to do? And in that moment, I empathized with her. And I realized in that moment, holy shit, I haven't felt my full color wheel feelings since forever, right? I didn't even remember when. Then we get on the plane, and I start really diving into the meditation about this, and I'm like, oh shit, this is from when my dad died. I have been literally distracting the fuck out of myself with exercise, all the quote unquote right things, along with cannabis, since my father passed. And so that experience of MDMA in the strip club is why I call it a ceremony, because that allowed me to be where I am today. That one decision right there that I made where I was holy shit, I'm going to stop interacting with cannabis because I don't want to numb out my emotions anymore, and this is clearly what's happening. When I came home and took that 3-month break, there was a month where I was still disempowering myself thinking it was the cannabis plant that did this.
Right.
And then literally what started my entire business and everything I do now was the belief one day that I tuned into where it was this is a me thing. This is me. And that was the first time in a long time I had taken full ownership over my experience of life and told myself that the only person to put you where you are is you. And if that's the case, then guess who the only person who can get you out is? Also you. So it was the biggest sting followed by the most empowerment I've ever experienced in a 10-minute session in my life. And so from that experience, I decided to start the podcast, fail forward, just was scared as hell, started it. And then a month later, I was just pouring my heart out on Facebook, writing these posts about whatever I was thinking about, tagged Mark in one of them after someone asked about language, who I had heard him on a podcast 3 years prior when I was walking around the cultivation room working on plants at the dispensary. He reaches out to me, was like, dude, you should hop on my course. So I didn't even know what a coach meant at that point, but I just had this feeling to say yes, so I said yes, and the rest is history, man, That's literally how it started. So that's why when I refer to it as a ceremony, it's dude, that is a ceremony for me, It's I don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks, but for me, that was the biggest changing point in my entire life, because that started everything that I am now, and it was fucking terrifying, but the fear of staying the same far outweighed the fear of change in that moment, and that's what allowed me to make that shift. So pain became a teacher, and that's what Paul always says, Paul Check, pain can be a teacher. If we choose to view it that way. There's nothing that says you have to. There's no science that's going to back this up. But if you choose to believe that pain can be a teacher, and pains are signals, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, that something is off, well then you have information from which to correlate from and create a control from, and then actually look to remediate that issue, whatever it may be. And so it was super powerful, man. And it's a funny story too, and I really think that the more I experience life, whatever you want to call God, source, universe, I say God because I've uncharged the term for myself, but sure. I really think God is an eternal child. And I think that when you look at the people kind of closest to him, like the Dalai Lama and people like that, they're fucking laughing constantly. They can still bring the warrior out when it's needed, but they're an eternal kid. And I really think that all of this experience of life, when you think about synchronicities, serendipities, all of this, it's just one big game of warmer, colder. Are you getting warmer? Are you getting colder? And it's like when you play as kids, if you're getting warmer, the voice gets a little more excited. Warmer, warmer, right? And that's synchronicities, serendipities, wild chance encounters, right? Those kind of things that tell you whoa. Now again, they can be signs, they can just be random occurrences. We get to choose how we view them. For me, I like looking at it as signs because I like feeling like there's some deeper thing I'm moving towards. What that is, I don't ever want to know because it's a mystery. Right. But moving towards that makes me have more joy in life. Knowing that I don't know anything is what gives me the most joy, and that's how I liberated my mind by realizing that when I think I know shit, it just means I'm closed off to it, right? Like we were talking about earlier. If I choose to be open-minded, even if I believe 100% the earth is round, someone's like, dude, it's flat. I'm like, all right, give me your case. Because maybe I like it more. Yeah. Maybe I like it more. Yeah. How do I fucking know? And what does it really fucking matter if I think the earth is round or flat? It's like so many people waste so much energy on fucking Facebook and Instagram just bickering about this shit. And I'm like, dude, what is it going to change if one of you is right? Right? All it's going to do is waste your energy. And you're already talking to someone whose part of their identity is thinking the earth is the other way. So you're not going to change them, right? Even if they fully believe what you're saying, they're probably not going to admit it unless they're very developed. They're not going to admit they were wrong, right? And that's all people want, is to hear like, oh, you were wrong, I was right. You know, it's like, it's just so silly, man. It's mind traps, you know?
So you find yourself with the perfect mission. We'll call it the perfect car. You finally got the car that you should have, and you're driving it. You're not sure what the destination is, but you see that thick blue line leading you where you're going. And I think you're certainly gathering, there's more and more cars behind you. I can see it happening. So what's making the speed limit? Like, what is the thing that's currently not slowing you down or stopping you, but governing your trajectory and your velocity? And then separately, what is it going to take for you to reach cruising altitude and stay there?
Yeah, this is a great question. So the answer to the first question, awareness and honesty with myself. So for a long time, I was doing all gas, no brakes. And it's funny, you want to talk about affirmations. When I first joined and lifted, I started saying that term a lot, and it definitely kickstarted something for me. That's what I choose to believe. But at a certain point, I realized, okay, maybe I need a little bit of brakes. Yeah. You know, like after going on Aubrey, I realized, like, holy shit, we weren't really set up for that, right? Like, we didn't expect 300 calls to come in 2 weeks. Like, we didn't have a sales team ready. We didn't have any of this stuff ready, right? So when it comes to like wanting to get on Rogan and these kind of shows, I'm like, I need to slow down a little bit. I need to make sure my foundation is so fucking solid that no matter what hurricane hits that building, it's going to stand strong in that wind and that rain. And so for me, like, what it takes to reach cruising altitude is just continued awareness, more foundation, and more support, right? Which is what you're going to be helping with, right? Like having the dream team. You know, we got Freedom Builders is doing a lot of our work there. We got my producers doing all the work with the podcast and a lot of my content. And then you're going to be helping us structure the business. And then also Alex and I both continuing to learn from people like yourself and people like, for me, Paul Check, continuing to learn about our power zones, the mystery school. Like, you know, it's interesting because what I've realized is that there is definitely a balance between like, okay, yes, I want to do as many podcasts as possible. Yes, I want to go on as many podcasts as possible. Yes, I want to get as many clients as possible. I want to run as many classes as possible. I want to build as many courses as possible. But I also want to have time to like do this. I also want to have time to continue going out and doing what lights my heart up. Because like Mystery School is a perfect example, right? Where there was one night where I was, Rachel was at a retreat. So normally on the weekends is when I interact with cannabis, and usually I'm with her, and she doesn't really like Gaia, right? The network Gaia. Because it can be kind of boring, right? I love it, but like if you're looking for entertainment, probably not going to do you justice. And so she was gone, so I decided, I'm going to connect with cannabis, go through some breath work, see what happens. So after the breath work's over, I tried to find this book that I was going to read, couldn't find it. So I'm like, but I really wanted to watch Gaia. And I was kind of like telling myself I couldn't. So I put my bed in zero gravity, and I'm like, all right, you know what?
What kind of bed do you have?
Dude, it's not Sealy, it's a Platinum Series Beauty Rest Platinum Series with the adjustable base.
My friend makes that base.
Dude, it's
my friend Martin rolls me in on his Reverie, and if it's zero gravity, that's his.
Bro,
yeah.
It's the best. Yeah. It was the best decision.
I have one.
So fucking cool.
Yeah,
and so I'm on zero gravity. You know the feeling, right?
Yeah.
I'm just chilling out,
Full
vacation vibration. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I decided, I'm like, I'm gonna turn on Gaia. And this is like one of my first times I turned it on. So I go looking through there, and I see the show Mystery Teachings. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. I like mystery. So I click onto it. Dr. Teresa Bullard, one of the highest ranking mystery school people in the world. And I start watching her shit, and like certain of the episodes are more about like the I don't know, kind of like the history of the mystery school. And then there was one where it was actually like, hey, if you're looking to join, this is what you do. And I was like, I felt the call, so I go on my phone right there. And this is integration on the go for anyone who like wants to know what integration looks like. I feel the call from my heart. Fuck yes. I go on my phone. I find a practitioner. I reach out to them at 10 p.m. Next morning, I get a message back, and then 2 days later, I'm getting my life activation. So like mystery school, like is something that my heart called for, that now is one of the biggest things I talk about on podcasts.
Yeah.
People are obsessed with it. They want to know more about it, right? So like I want to have...
It's the name.
It's so fucking cool.
It's instant.
Yeah, and so like those calls, I want to have time to follow those too, because that becomes more of my direct experience story that really people are looking for. You know, like when I go on a podcast, I often think about like, I could come on here and just tell everything about cannabis in a very calculator type way, but people want to know like, why cannabis, right? Like, what's your story? You know, like, how did you get to these things? What fires you up? That's the stuff that at least I really want to hear. Like, when I listen to Aubrey or Paul, like, it's cool, I'll hear about Onnit, whatever, but I want to hear like who Onnit made Aubrey become. I want to hear like what the process was of creating the business and how who he had to evolve into to get that done. Like I'm much more curious about that than actually like hearing about the business, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting to look at the product that the machine made, not as much interesting to look at the machine that made
Exactly.
the
Like I'm obsessed with like, you know, like what actually like what kind of person was able to build that and what they went through. Because now that I'm on that journey of like, you could call it the hero's journey if you want, right? Like I think that's what I would call it, the hero's journey. Because it's not just with business, it could be with anything, right? People that climb crazy mountains. I want to hear like, how the fuck did you get started with that, right? So it doesn't need to be business, but whatever that hero's journey is, that's what I'm obsessed with. And if you think about any movie, right, that's really good, it has a hero's journey in it. And so it's very interesting how this is like hardwired into our DNA to like look for those stories. And that's why I love what Kyle does so much, what Brooks Meadows does, like these people that like allow people to tap deeper into their own story. And that's been huge for me. I mean, working with Kyle was fucking awesome. I mean, he helped me formulate the entire story that I've told on your podcast. I told it on Aubrey's, I've told it on Paul's, I've told it on pretty much everyone's about like the origin story of me, which is like finding cannabis when I had anxiety, it connected me deeper to myself. Then moving through my dad passing away and helping him through end of life with, you know, cannabis, which helped me realize the connection, deepening benefits that cannabis had regarding connecting to other aspects of the world, not just yourself. And then being able to now do it in a way that it's bringing it to the all. Like that I, we, all thing is really interesting in the story because it's like it starts with me, right? It had to start with me for me to understand like, whoa, there's something here. Then it had to be shown to me with other people experiencing it, right? The we, which is like what we're in right now, the we. And then when we feel supported enough by the people around us that love us, they're like, hey, dude, you got something good here, right? Then we feel comfortable to start moving into the all and facing the opposition because we know we got the support of the we. And so it's been really interesting to dive into these heroes' journeys and write my own and continue to write it. And just fucking cool, man, you know?
Yeah, you're pretty early on in your book. Which is cool. And I mean that like figuratively. Maybe literally as well.
No, I have two book ideas. So,
that's awesome. You're pretty early in your book, and I think I love thinking about your life as a book or your career as a book because I think, and I was talking to Sammy about this on a different podcast earlier, but I think when you think of your life as a book and you look at the early chapters of that book, you get a real feel of who the character was and who they're becoming. And I think it can, if the more you pay attention, the more clearly it can sort of clean up the way the rest of it should go.
Yes.
Because I don't think, if even as simple as like planning out your resume, which is like the lamest thing we could think of at this moment, right?
Yeah.
But even doing that, it's like, okay, I can understand why a person would leave the military to go to finance school, big dreams. I can understand why getting into fitness, they would start a small gym. And then I can understand why they would maybe move back, fall in love with that passion, and take their business acumen and go to run that gym.
Yes.
What I wouldn't understand is like if they decided to go to clown school and become a juggler as much. It's clear that your story's narrative is like following a trajectory.
Yeah.
And there's a million outcomes that it could be.
Yes.
But I think that it seems like you're really conscious of what the chapters have been and sort of the types of things that they're being built to. And I, for one, am really excited to continue reading your story, Ryan.
Dude, hell yeah, man.
So as we bring this,
to keep writing it.
Yeah, man. So as we bring this story to a little bit of a close for this particular chapter, what are you most excited about right now? And how can people that are listening to this, who inevitably will be drawn to it, how can they find you?
Yeah, man, what excites me most right now? You know, my buddy has a good question. What fascinates you? You know, and so exciting, fascinating, like those are words I love because, you know, I feel like they're not talked about enough, which sounds like kind of silly, but they really aren't. Like, you know, a lot of us know what we don't like, what we don't want, but none of us really think about what excites us and what fascinates us in these kind of questions. So I'm glad you asked that. And for me, you know, it's simple. It's finding my joy and giving it to others, you know, so it's continuing to find more and more sources of joy and then finding ways that I can give it back to others and see them spawn joy from that and then give that back to others. And like that whole reciprocity loop, that's what I'm obsessed with right now. And that's, you know, different areas like shamanism, mystery school, Muay Thai, music, exercise, cars. I mean, like there's so many different things that lead to me finding joy, but I think the ultimate thing is being of service. You know, if I had to put them all in kind of one thing, it's like being able to have amazing conversations, spark other people's spark of inspiration, get mine sparked, and be able to share in this collective human experience is so fucking cool. And then for anyone looking to find me, you can find me on Instagram at @TheRealRyanSprague. And there actually is another Ryan Sprague out there that I found who's a fucking regular on Ancient Aliens. So you want to talk about weird fucking shit happening? Like that is like, again, like I love Ancient Aliens, right? I love that kind of stuff. So that was interesting. So sorry to that, Ryan Sprague, if you hear this, you're real too, guaranteed.
Pretty dope too,
yeah,
it sounds like.
Pretty dope, definitely. And so you can find me there. You can find the business Instagram at highly.optimized. We're giving out tons of free tips there on cannabis and tons of fun stuff. We have a free Facebook group that I'm in every Wednesday tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern called the Ceremony Circle. You can find that in my link tree. You can find access to the Conscious Cannabis Guide, which is a free PDF that anyone who's like, all right, I'll buy the ticket and take a trip into your world. Start there, see if it resonates with you. And then the 2 podcasts, Highly Optimized Podcast, which showcases conscious leaders living a life beat to their own drum, Hero's Journey Podcast. And then the This One Time on Psychedelics podcast, which is diving into not only the experiences behind psychedelics, but also who people have become as a result of these experiences and their tips and tricks moving forward. So that's where you can find me.
Yeah, there's a lot there. That'll also be in the show notes below. So right now, there's 300 of you that want to pick up your phone and call Ryan. And so what I will ask is that you each take turns and you spread it out, because if 300 people raise their hands, I want to make sure that you help all 300
yes, dude.
of those motherfuckers.
Thank you.
Ryan, I fucking love you, man.
Love
this
you
is
too,
great.
dude.
It's always
Thank
great
you.
to talk to you, whether
Hell
we're
yeah.
recording or not. So thank you so much for making the time.
Hell yeah.
And we'd love to have you on as a third time sometime.
Dude, third time's the charm, man. Twist my arm.
Yeah, right on. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you guys.
And have a great week.